Yes, I mean, last talk. It's most of the talk is like actually showing some code and some demos. I didn't prepare some slides, but have some notes in Sublime here. So very little about me. My name is Jannek. I'm in software development for quite some time, and for the last couple of years, I don't know, 3-4 years, I've been working closely together with Pixelate. But mainly I'm a freelance developer, but by coincidence we just founded Pixelate Germany, like a Pixelate GmbH as a subsidiary of Pixelate Group now. So we are doing some projects together, and I'm heavily involved in Preside project development. So this talk is about the form system of Preside, and in particular admin forms. So how and I mean basically the form system is universal, general. You can use it like for everything, like front-end website form definitions, but we focus here now on the admin part of it. And I'm going to demo some like core functionality. Everything can be, I mean, tweaked and extended, and you can define your own and easily customizable. But this here should focus about what you get out of the box and how far you can get with like the standard things Preside Core offers. Most of it is really well documented, but there are some hidden features that are really helpful and which might need some documentation love sooner or later. But you can, I mean, either you know about it or you really, as already mentioned, have a look at how Preside Core does it, because, I mean, basically Preside Core eats its own dog food. It uses the form system in basically anywhere forms are used, so you can like cheat and have a look how they do it here. Prerequisites. So what I did in advance, I just created a new Preside site using the basic skeleton and added that, which we already saw today, that Star Wars extension, just to have some data to play around, and that's like already. Look if it runs. How fast is the reload? Okay, that's acceptable. Okay, so I mean, as we've seen, like we have there's some delay here. Okay, so we've seen in the data manager customization what you can do, like customization wise here, but we now would like focus on forms. So let's get back to my next slide. Notes list. Okay, that way I'm able to copy paste also stuff. So basically, I mean, form definitions and I18N are a little tied together, and forms are defined in XML files living beneath /forms in your application code, and similar in the Preside core, also beneath /forms, and they have a specific anatomy, so that like you define the general form, and you can like split it up and lay out your form in various tabs, field sets, and field elements, and optionally also have like rules for validation on form fields. How this is nicely rendered and displayed is like accompanied with I18N files that we already know from Preside objects for like labeling your fields, but you can, in the same way, you can also label like how the form layout would be. And to start up, I mean, we have seen like the Preside extension is here, which basically doesn't define anything. I mean, it defines a page type, which is here a different thing, but it doesn't for the Preside objects that we have, like it's Star Wars character, film, planet, species, starship, and vehicle. It doesn't define any forms yet, and that means by default, if for an object Preside doesn't find any form definition at all, it just auto-generates on the fly what it thinks would be like best based on the properties defined in your object. So, but what you, I mean, what you get by default, for instance, if we have a look like at the edit form of a character here now based on the property type and database type, it renders various form fields now. It decides, for instance, that for whatever reason here's like it's a 200 character limit, therefore it renders a different form field than for than it does for like eye color or something, where I don't know how. That's probably where's the break point at 100 characters or something that starts rendering a text area instead of like a simple text box. And by default, like for your many-to-one and many-to-one and many-to-many relationships, it defines these object pickers here, where you can like and that's like we didn't define a form at all. But if and that works like for simple objects, but as soon as you want to start like giving the user either like a better experience or splitting up the form, it makes sense to define a form element. And once you define a form element, you need to take care of like every property you want to have in that form. So what we could do now in our own code, define a Preside objects folder beneath forms, and within that define Star Wars character.xml. Oh yeah, that's fast. So what I've done here now is created a form, and it was like in the standard part, it's like one tab, one field set, all like the generated fields are in there. But I think it makes more sense to split that up in the form. So we defined like two different tabs here, and have split it up in various field sets as well. And now we can like in addition to that, we would need beneath the I18N folder objects where is it? This one. Okay. So basically, the extension itself already defined an I18N file for the properties, right? Where it says like, that's my title singular description, and it defines like, for instance here, name and help text on that one. And we basically merged from like the application code now only those that like come from my application, which is like I defined two tabs like basics and relations, and defined some field sets, and I saw in the extension that there was one field title missing for the home world. We can see that here, so that it's like it's not capitalized. We basically add that here, and if we, that's basically what we want to do. And if we now go ahead and reload, yes.
I could also, if it does start getting slow, to reload forms.
Yeah. what you see here now we have like it's the form changed, and we have like I didn't add a field set for the basics thing, therefore we don't have like a header here, but you can per tab you can define like a title and a description, and then per field set a title and a description. And obviously the main functions that have already been defined, like per field you have got like help text here, and what is missing, you could also have like one additional thing that says like field, my field name dot placeholder, and if it's like empty you could have a placeholder text there. That's all done in the IATNN. We've got a separate tab for like relations, what the character is related to. Maybe we have a look at another character which has some more relations. Luke. Yeah. Okay. So that's this. By default, there's one different thing here. Specifically, if you work with Preside admin forms, you have this attribute of binding, which basically allows like Preside to decide and to know what data to put in there. If you work with front-end forms, where you basically want like the system to just render the form with a specific form field name, and you take care of the logic by yourself, then you would use a field and then the name, and not having like a binding. Now, then it's not binded to a Preside object. And one thing what you can do, what I show later, is if you have got like from core something or from an extension something where form is defined including bindings, but you want to get rid of something that was defined like in core, then you would also use like field name deleted equals true. I will show that in a minute. What I've done here, out of the box, if you don't explicitly define a form control, as mentioned, Preside will determine what's best for your Preside object field to use, but you are able, regardless of what it's defined on the object, you can also define that on the field set. For instance, I mean, the character name, for whatever reason, was not mandatory in the database, but you could like say, even though it's like a nullable field in the database, you could go ahead and say like, I make this now required here within the form, and give it like, it's maybe for whatever reason in the database another character max length, and you could restrict it, and in the moment that form renders here, it will this will override what you get from the Preside object. So, yeah, that's I mean, because it shows like the name with a star, this one is required, and if I add a new character and miss this out, then it will the validation will fail. One thing that we see here, and that's also fairly new, I think it used to be like, you can either define, if you want like all the forms for add and editing should be the same, then you just define a object name.xml just beneath Preside objects, but you could also have individual forms for adding and editing a record. We'll show that also in a second. One last thing in regards to the general form, we have either explicitly defined URIs to like find the matching IATNN property, or you could have that convention based, because that's like a plain Preside object that's convention based on the path where it is, and it knows where the corresponding IATNN file is. But you could also define that IATNN base URI, which basically tells the form where to look, which file to look at, and then it will retrieve the the fields. And the last thing you obviously could do, you could also on a tab field set and field level define the either hard-coded the labels or define the IATNN URIs there. But most of the time, I mean, if working with Preside objects, the whole convention-based system works fine and it's less code. Okay. Okay, as mentioned, we have like now we're getting into like the form control thing. Preside core comes with really a lot of form controls, which are there are simple ones, but also more complex ones. We have, as mentioned, those automap form controls based on field type, but you can customize them, as we've seen here, on the form definition for now like a simple object. And if we, for instance, have a look at how what other objects exist out of the box, if it's like if a DB type is text, then you by default you would get a rich editor here. If the DB type is or if it's numeric, then it will give you like this spinner form control. It tries to do as best as possible to like not have you write any code, but you are fine to do. And then, for instance, what we could do next is, as we've seen here, like characters, for instance, define where is it? Edit eye colors, and it might be a good thing to have if you've got like more or less static data and you want like a selected list, a select list basically, but with not user editable data. It makes sense to like define an enum here. An enum you would define in your config CFC. Saying these are my available enum colors, and probably there's like some unknown or not available color, and there's a related properties file where you are able to what is it called? EI colors. Where you are able to define labels for it. I mean, now it's pretty pointless because the values are the same. So if we change this to yellow, then it will render differently. And now where we could use this is, let's see, in our characters eye color field, we could say use form control. Oh no, we would do it on probably on the.
You could do it on the object, and you probably would do it. You would just put enum on the object.
Yeah, to have it in the filter as well. Oh yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and define the object here. Preside objects. That was it, right? Eye colors. Okay. So and basically we come to that in a bit as well. I mean, the eye color property has been defined with a specific in the extension here, like saying it's a string varchar max length 50. I don't need to like repeat that, and it will just merge the whole field definition. I only want to add like that it should use an enum. And what Preside now does, if I reload that, I will instead get a select box where like all my, and also the yellow, my selectable values are, and I can like filter on that and save it. And what you mentioned, if I'm, and now because I defined it on the object, my, let me see, this changes as well, so that I can say, show me like all brown-eyed Star Wars characters. So and I mean it's a plain string in the database. So next. Okay, one really handy and useful form controller is the object picker, which comes bundled with the core, which is really helpful. And we would, like, for instance, define a completely new property here, saying, which one is it? Snippet. This one. So we would say, like, we would want per character define like additional characters which come from the same homeworld. What we would need to do for this is have a look at, okay, we need the corresponding I18N, not in the extension, but here, saying character friends, okay, and okay, basically I define an additional field set and saying binding this to the new field to be defined. And the interesting part is I'm able to relate these object pickers to each other. Basically saying I know there's another form field homeworld which is here. And I want to have within that select box only values which are from the same homeworld to be selectable. And there's one handy attribute which basically says I cannot use this if the homeworld is not filled out. And if I reload this now, and again have a look for Luke. Then, I mean, Luke has as homeworld Tatooine set. I mean, we can remove this here now. Relations. What did I miss? Didn't I reload?
Field set. You're missing a tab. It's outside of the
oh yeah. So homeworld and species. Now we have like friends and family in that tab, and these homies, because I didn't save, there's still Tatooine selected. So basically all characters which have set homeworld Tatooine would now be selectable here. And I could say like, I don't know if Darth Vader is, yeah, it's friends and family in more or less. So that way it's really nice to filter down particular things. And what you could do in addition is say like I have a form field which is not binded to anything, but which is like done with just a name and object picker, just to like pre-filter a list of the actual values I want to have next. We've done that on a couple of projects.
So could you prevent Luke Skywalker from being
yeah,
visible as a homie for Luke Skywalker?
Yes, possibly.
Possibly, but I think in the end you might need like a known form control which just wraps up the object picker, and yeah. I didn't prepare that.
How is the data pulled in the object picker? Is it rendered in the side, or is it remotely pulled, or?
Ajax, right? I mean, it's an Ajax call, and yeah.
You can also choose it to be non-Ajax explicitly.
Most of the time, and for instance, if it's really large data sets, like you pull in thousands of records, then it only pulls in like a subset, some, and then you can search, and it will shrink down the list. So yeah. Next up would be. Just like another thing where we can use forms in the admin is within system configs, and like I show like one simple use case, and then something which then leads back to the Preside object again. For that, we want to have some filters which we can define in the config CFC, saying we want a simple filter here. Basically, we can define in code something that you can pass in to the object picker field definitions, basically saying that's like hard-coded, saying like classic films, just the filter is defined as like a filter, its episode ID is 4, 5, or 6. And that's basically that struct that you can construct there is basically the same that you would pass into your select data calls. And select data is flexible, as it takes filters that you supply in here as like extra filters. So you are actually, if you use those in code, you can combine like custom filters in your logic with like config defined filters here. So that's a simple one. And now we want to go ahead and say we define system config. That's also done possible to scaffold something like that, but I prepared it like this, lookups.xml, and by convention, same as with the Preside objects, this system-config is like by convention all the system settings that you define yourself and that also Preside core defines live here. So where is it? Snippet form. I don't find it. Lookups there. So basically, what we want to do here now, and here you can see it defines. Does that do it by convention if I leave that out? No. On system configs, you need to define it so that we have a related i18n file, system config. Where is it? Lookups.properties. i18n lookups. So basically saying like this is how it looks, and we give that field a nice title here. And coming back, what we basically here do, saying like it's not used anywhere, it's just now here for sake of the example, what's the favorite classic film, and we define a control object picker. By default, if it's binded with a Preside object, then you don't need to set for the many-to-one things or many-to-many things the control object picker, but you can explicitly say it here like control object picker, pick Star Wars films and filter classic films only. So if we now have a look where that shows up, we have a new lookup system setting here, and like favorite classic films, and we only see those three: New Hope, Return of the Jedi, and Empire Strikes Back. And of course, The Empire Strikes Back is the best classic. So that was a simple filter applied to an object picker. and what we could do now, in addition, like to combine and get a little more fancy, but to show you like the possibilities of the object picker and where, and in combination with filters, we could create droid friends on the Star Wars character. Therefore, oftentimes you find yourself having user-defined data which you need to use in code. And typically that really makes sense. We had that on a lot of projects, that you go ahead and map those data from that's user-defined data, but we need to like know something about it. We need to know, for instance, now what the where is it? Snippet form lookup droid specific. We want to need to know, like there's a user-defined droid species, and we need to know what that is so that we can use it in code. So basically we say we define droid species object picker based on species. Go ahead and snippet, where is it? Droid species. Define that here. If reloading, and they're like on larger projects, there's like you've got like hundreds of those mappings to be able to say like this is user-defined content, but I want to make sure that I'm able to use this in code, and therefore defining a real mapping here instead of like, let's say, annotating the object itself or something. And now where we want to make use of this is in the Star Wars character itself. So we would say we define an additional property here, snippet, where is it, property, droid friends. So basically every Star Wars character would have droid friends, again a many-to-many relationship towards Star Wars characters. And one nice little thing here, I'm not sure whether that's documented, is you can make that sortable here, which leads to the relationship table that gets generated gets an additional property sort order, and it does?
It always does, actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And you can, and within your object picker you can basically define what the order is of the many-to-many selection. So we would need the according I18N here, droid friends, and we want to use that in the it's also friends. So where is it? Form friends probably. Oh no, that was the other one. This one, okay. And we haven't defined that yet, and that gets a little more complex. There are two like flavors of filters you can define. These are like the simple ones because they are static, but you could also define dynamic filters here, which are basically inline functions. And what we basically do here now is define a function which returns the same structure with filter and maybe filter params like that are supplied to your select data statement, and it basically here uses the system configuration service and gets the lookup like a specific value, the droid species defined in the lookups. This notation is kind of like weird if you know, I mean, in your services and handlers you can easily inject stuff, but like as this here is done at like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's at a different rendering time?
It's because it's in the config. I think at some point in the future we should add a convention where you can create a handler to be a filter, because that then has access to everything. And,
yeah.
It was quite old, this.
And so basically now you're able to define filters that use dynamic data in there. And I mean, you could like also put, for instance, I think there is in Preside core, you have got something like active pages or something, which does check is the page active, but it also checks is it published. And if it has got like a restriction on the publication, for instance, you can like delay the publication for next week, and therefore it would need to like the filter needs to take the current date into account, and you could use something like this as well, or like Preside core uses something like this. And so basically, is it all that we need? Yeah, probably. Let's see. And if we go back to the data manager and the characters now, Luke is still filtered, edit this one, and see now we have droid friends here, and it doesn't filter. Why doesn't it filter? Droid character. It's way too many. Droid friends.
Did you definitely save the setting when you picked droid in the settings file?
Oh no, this one. I didn't save this one. Oh, it doesn't throw an error if you define an interesting. Okay, and so now we should know. Is that a caching issue now?
Ah, yeah. It could be because it's on the. It'll be a browser cache as well. The prefetch. The prefetch in the object picker, because it uses Bloodhound or something, some JavaScript. You might need to do that. It could be that. Yeah. Another way to bypass that cache would be just to update one of the records in that object.
Ah, okay. So any record.
It goes, my data's changed, so I'll fetch them again.
Yeah, you mentioned that again once. Let me see. Yeah, you really need to know that to bust the cat. Okay, so so basically, like the sortable thing now makes it that you can like sort it, and it stores it with the sort numbers, and I mean then whenever you use it, you could like use the sort order here. Let's see. I mean in the where is it? Basically, this is something that is generated now, so that you've got a sort order in the database here on that relationship table. Then, in terms of, I mean, that's it for form controls. Like to show you some like what's supported out of the box, and I think you can really do a lot of things with this and get. But if that's not enough, I mean, you can define your own form controls, and which is really easy. That's beyond the scope of this session, but yeah. Anyway, that would be like the next step. That's number 4. We're almost done. Next thing would be validation. Preside, like the form system of Preside, integrates with the validation framework that it ships with. That's under the hood. It's like CodeBox. What is it? Oh, okay. Sorry, didn't know that. Okay, so there's a validation framework, and specifically on admin validations, you would let's say define basic validations that are on field attributes like required max length, unique indexes, and stuff. For instance, if let's define a new character and save it, then it says this is a required field. That's like the validation framework that kicks in. And if we, for instance, say, let's see, that's what I wanted to do, saying the other concept of creating forms. If I say for a Star Wars film, I only want to modify the add form, I don't care about the edit form, then I would define a folder named like the object, and then have an object, new file, admin.add.xml. And what I would do here, like saying, we have seen the title was pretty long, I would like do it, maybe putting required here as well. Required equals true, max length 50, and would like have episode ID, min value 1, max value 9. Because that could make sense, we would in addition say we define that on an object, Star Wars film.cfc, making with it snippet episode ID, making like the episode ID, putting a unique index on this one. And what that now does, reloading. If we head over to the films management, define a new film and saying like we want to define episode 1, then that's done on the server side. That must be unique. It checks the database because it found like the unique index on it, and makes sure. And obviously -1 does also not work. Please enter a value equal to 1, or if I put in 10, then less than 9. And if I use the control, then I can only use 1 to 9 values. So and there's like, for the validation, there's like always a server-side part, how to do the validation, and optionally, or from a lot of those, is also a client-side part. That is like basically does validate it on the client side in the browser. Let's see what's next. There are really a bunch of existing core validators, like where you can see required min lengths, max lengths, etc., etc., etc. Interesting thing is, for instance, admin change password for the password, where it gets more complex, and you can define your own rules. And this is like a core rule which basically says like the confirm password, and if I want to change the password, needs to be like the validator same as, and therefore it compares the two fields, and it does it really on client and server side. That's like for the website user, comes with Preside core. But what you could, for instance, do, where do I have my code? Okay, let's say there's like out of the box there's a regex validator, which you would say on Star Wars character, saying like the birth year is really strange. They define it like it needs to be a numeric value, and it's either before Battle of Yavin or after Battle of Yavin, or it's unknown. So, and then you could go ahead and say, in this case, this is also a URI string here, and you would say, like, we would add here, where is it? This one. Invalid birth year, see help. And now if we have a look how this looks like. Does the regex do it? Does it on server side? It doesn't it on client side? I think client side as well. So if I edit this and say it's like 1972, save that. No, that's wrong, and it says like BBY here, and unknown works fine as we defined that. Yeah. Oh yeah. Now it does it on 22 before Battle of Yavin. Okay. And I mean that's what comes with the core, but you can easily define your own validators for, and it's really, I mean, it's super easy to define validators. It's a service which has like validation provider true, and you mention it in the code in your config CFC once you define it there, and then you can basically validate like whenever you want. But you get a lot out of core already. Okay. Almost last one. Then we have merging overrides. We already saw that a little, but as the extension didn't define forms at all, we now use something from the core. The core comes with that website user feature, which is in this skeleton disabled, and we enable it now so that we get that additional sidebar item, and basically almost everything that you see form-wise here, which ships with Preside, like uses the same. So this is like just a normal form, and as it's a normal form, you can like tweak it. These are the standard fields, and you, for instance, you would say like, in my system, I do not need that permissions thing here, and I might need an additional field on that. So, and if we wanna tweak this, we go ahead and say within our Preside objects, we define the same object as in core Preside website user.cfc. Where is it? I think that's it, probably. Yeah, favorite Star Wars film of that user. Define the corresponding I18N beneath Preside objects. New website. I don't find it. Can't see anymore. There. There it is. Okay, and that blends all, like the object definition, the I18N definitions, and also the form definition now blends together. And if we have a look at the Preside core, how it does it here, Preside forms, Preside objects, and it's really handy. And you cannot like mention it often enough that you really should have a look at like the Preside core, how things are done there. So basically what we want to do, that's the form how it's defined in core. And what we now could do is we don't need to pick the whole thing, we can only do the adjustments to that form in our application code, which would mean define beneath forms Preside objects, new folder website user, define that field admin.add.xml. And say like the things that we want to change is add this favorite Star Wars film with a sort order 50, which means it renders beneath sort order 40. And in this case, what I mentioned before, if you want to delete something, and you could do that on tab level, on field set level, or on field level, you use name and then deleted equals true. Let's see how that looks like. And so now what we basically done is like to our like website user is now a favorite film object, and these are gone. So basically, and that's what you can do like with every single Preside object, every single form, just add or remove what you need or what you don't need, and therefore tweak whatever you want and do whatever you want with it. And that's almost last thing. Quickly mention it. You could like forms and that's really neat. Can be feature dependent, and it's like a part of forms also. So, for instance, if you define yourself a new feature and snippet, saying like, for instance, I define a feature that is enabled, can be enabled or disabled on application level, and that feature is named homies. And I would say on my where was it, Star Wars character film, I would say like this is dependent on feature equals homies, and that's kind of the same. It could be done on field set, it could be done on field and on tab, and I think it could also be done like on component level to just completely get rid of the component depending on the feature. Obviously, I mean, nothing changes now, but if I go ahead and say, like in my config CFC, I disable this, and have a look here. Characters. Look, and now the homies are gone. And that's nice because I mean you could use like that's a codebox concept with the environments, right? Local hosts and stuff. I mean you could, in theory, you could have like different sets of features enabled, disabled per environment, saying I have like perhaps some internal properties that show up or that I could manage like during development time, but I don't want that in production. So you could like switch on off features based on your environment.
The feature thing as well, Core uses it a lot. You may or may not have picked it up in Miki's demo, but until he enabled website users, there were a whole load of tabs in like the page forms that weren't there.
Oh.
But when that feature was then enabled, they came in like around permissions, like all the access controls.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah.
If this one,
yeah.
right? Yeah. This whole tab in the side tree is not there if the website users feature is not enabled. And yeah, because I mean it doesn't make sense to have it. And one last thing, I mean I don't show it in detail, but just to mention it, you could also define per tab, field sets, and fields permission keys that are required. So basically, you could say like a super user who has like more permissions, more rights, is able to edit different content or additional content than someone else, and that's also pretty powerful feature. And that's it from any questions.
Yeah, and the form builder forms also created the same way, so they are stored as XML?
No, I mean that's really, I mean you basically the form controls like are kind of reused, but you would have like a different rendering could have a different rendering context for form builders. Most of, for instance, the object picker is clearly only meant to be used like this in the admin because it also checks CMS permissions and stuff, and you wouldn't use like an object picker in the website, in the front end website. You would define your own form control for like selecting data based on a specific object. And like the form builder is like not to be mixed with the Preside form system. I mean, it's two different things, concepts.
But is there a way to programmatically seed those forms into a new site that I want to set up? To say admin users don't have to create them, but we actually
currently not. I mean, you could do it just by inserting the data with Excel things, but
all right.
So you can write code which programmatically.
But not in a super easy way or so. Okay.
I've got one question. Could you show an example of how to use a formula? Because could you use formulas within?
No.
You can't.
No.
How does the slug work? That's a special type.
Yes.
Okay.
Control.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you put icons on tabs?
Icons on tabs. I haven't tried it yet. Is it new?
No.
Okay.
I'm guessing the
It's undocumented.
It's documented. Yeah. Just in the properties tab, icon class.
Ah, cool.
Type
Oh yeah.
or whatever, yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. Yeah. See.
Just the quick edit and quick add.
Yes.
Can you create forms for those?
Yes.
You can.
Yeah. And basically, if you, where would we?
Website users got an example of those.
Does it? No.
It doesn't, but it's got a set password one.
Oh yeah, that's it.
I mean, that's a bit creepy, probably. Let me see. Quick add equals true. So this is a many-to-many because, like, I mean, it not really probably makes sense, but we try it anyway. So, who is not? For those who are not familiar with this, like the object picker has also the possibility to allow quick adding or quick editing of like the related objects. Basically, here we say I added like the quick add functionality for starships, which basically means I'm editing Luke Skywalker here, and I want to like add a starship that doesn't exist yet, and without leaving this record and first creating it, I could create quick add the starship here, and you are able, and by default this uses like the default. If it doesn't find a specific admin quick add XML form, it uses the default one.
It will go quick add default.
Okay, so and you might want to like have quick add here only name and model, and if one would like to enter more data, then go to the editing of the starship. So you have control about of those, and if you enter quick edit, then you are able to let's do it. Quick edit equals true. What that gives you is that nice pencil, where you basically could say permission-wise. What does happen permission-wise if I have not the permission to edit? We don't know. Okay, so then now I'm able to like edit the X-Wing here, save it, and as well. So I mean, where this comes handy in, like, think of you've got a blog and you would like to add text, and obviously that makes sense to add text on the fly there. There it makes sense. Probably in this case, not so much. Yeah. Any more questions? I didn't show the asset picker, and I mean there are other form controls out of the box.
Rendering forms as well, and there's some dynamic options with that.
Once again?
So you can, if you're building like a custom page in the data manager, for example, and you want to render a form, so you can do so, but while you're rendering it, so that the definitions are all static XML, but you can pass in dynamic data as you're rendering the form, so you can say, well, the label on this field or the help text on this field is going to be dynamic based on some other
as
you're rendering the form. You can't do that with what you've shown here because it's all data manager and you're using code that already exists there, but you can do that. But there is some more stuff. Part two, probably.
And yes, and one thing that I didn't mention was like you can extend forms. You could say like one form extends another, so that like by default it picks like the parent and then applies the like extending form on this, and that's, I mean, and all this, I think the form system is really well documented. Some form controls are missing, some I'm not sure whether things like the disabled if unfiltered things and the filter by is documented, I think. Yeah, the docs on the form system itself are really good. So yeah, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, the last one. I'm curious. Tall hand. I'm curious, if you added another character here, your homies was based on the location of
Yeah.
Luke in this case.
Yes.
Is it dynamic? So if I'm
Yes.
adding one,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
And if you change the value of the other form filter, it will change.
So although it has
Yes.
a mistake,
So yes.
it's not going to the DB. It's
Oh yeah. We quickly need to.
So you can't save it then when you change it. So you first fill the home world, then you change you select the homie, you go back to home world, change home world.
Then it will clear out these. So basically, by default now that's a new character and no homeworld selected. So basically the homies field is disabled. If I now say like Tatooine relations homies, these are the guys from Tatooine. And if I then say Alderaan, let me see if someone from Alderaan is available. The homies, yeah, Leia, for instance, from Alderaan. So
You could do some more complex stuff with that as well. That's quite fun.
yeah, and it doesn't. It doesn't by default need to be. That's what I didn't mention. This one is like filter by field home world. That defines like which field in the same form is used. Like this is this. But there's also a second filter by field equals home world. And this property is needed for which property on the object, like on that related object to filter on. But as in this case, that's like the same. It's also home world. Therefore, filter by field defaults to what filter by is. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's a little tricky to get head around it. Like filter by is like which other form field to pick. And filter by field is like in my Star Wars character, it's this name, so like this property. And it could be if this is something else, then you would need to know how to filter the list of selectable items there. Yeah. Philip.
You mentioned if you have the permissions to add or added some values.
Mm-hmm.
If I have not the permission, what is the concept to show the value? Like the if else, if I have the permissions, show the add or edit icon or whatever. If I have not that one, can I choose the control read only? In the same form.
Oh no, it will simply not render. I'm pretty sure it will not render.
Can I have the same twice, the same value? One with the permission key and one with that? So just
Yes.
controls?
With a different control, would you put? If it was read only, you could probably just put a different name on it anyway, because you can't have two fields with the same name. And
Okay,
the
so
same
the name.
But yes.
What I mean, if I don't have the permission, I want to see the birthday, maybe the birthday, but I have the permission
Yeah.
to
It,
change it.
I'm without having tried it out, I'm pretty sure it doesn't do it like this in the moment. It just simply doesn't
Maybe in
render
the
it.
post-render edit form or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you combine this with customizing the data manager, you can do all sorts of there.
Cool. Okay. Thanks. Thanks a lot.